You run Omega?
I am Omega.
Aria is the de facto ruler of Omega, the nominal capital of the Terminus systems. She's also known as the Pirate Queen of Omega, and she's fiercely possessive of the space station and will do anything to protect it and maintain her dominance. When Shepard first meets Aria, he asks her if she runs Omega. She simply replies with a laugh and states, "I am Omega," coupled with her rule, her one rule, which is...
Don't fuck with Aria.
So in this video, we will explore all that we know of Aria T'Loak through established canon and official canon works in the series. We will also add our own speculation to fill in some of the gaps, and as always with our lore videos, there is obviously some spoilers. So if you haven't played, go play first and then come watch. So Aria had a colourful past prior to her arrival on Omega. When she did arrive on the station, she worked as an exotic dancer in the Afterlife Club. However, this was merely a clever cover for Aria, as she eventually killed the owner of the Afterlife Club and claimed ownership for herself. She continued to form alliances and consolidate power before finally overthrowing the ruler of Omega. The Krogan she deposed, whom she derisively named the Patriarch, was spared as an example of her power over others.
So Aria is very authoritarian in her reign over Omega, which... Okay, this is again already a bit of speculation, which I wasn't going to do, but I actually disagree with that point. I don't think she is that authoritarian with her rule, because, you know, when Shepard and Samar searching for Morin, she said that something about I knew, like, it's only in the Ardat she can do that, and then Samara says, "You haven't tried to stop her yourself," and Aria just responds, "Oh, she hasn't tried to seduce me, has she?" So I actually think she's not that authoritarian. She lets things go as long as as long as no one's trying to go for her and, affect her power. So I actually disagree with that.
I think that's kind of the point of Omega as well. We talk about it in our Omega video, but that's kind of the point, is that, how are you going to rule Omega if you're trying to stop all these, there's so much going on in Omega all the time, whether it's, above the table or below the table. If she was authoritarian, she would want everything to be known to her, but a lot of it she doesn't care about as long as it's not affecting her. So yeah. Anyways.
Well, and I think that's what works. That's why people still go and don't try to overthrow her too much, because they know that they can sort of still do their little thing without too much issues. So anyway, so we'll skip that part and just say her organization is strong and her men are extremely loyal, mostly. Almost nothing that happens on Omega escapes her notice, which does cause mercenary groups to think twice before crossing her. But no matter who she deals with, she does make sure that she has the upper hand in the bargaining. She has centuries of experience with dealing with people who thought themselves being in better positions, but simply by observing a person, she can easily read a lot about them and usually immediately knows when they are lying. She is determined to always get the last word in a conversation, which reinforces her position and her authority as Omega's ruler.
Yep, so Aria has commando training and is a very, very powerful biotic, which you eventually see in the Mass Effect Omega DLC. She has survived for over 1,000 years, not by needlessly exposing herself to risk. She has the patience and cautiousness to see long-term plans through to fruition, and obviously she has the power to back up these plans as well.
Yeah. So in an appearance in Mass Effect Incursion, which is a comic, I believe, Aria interrupts a meeting between the Collectors and the Blue Suns, who are bartering over a group of humans. After she kills everyone involved, Aria then learns that the Collectors have sinister plans for humanity. I mean, it's the only way to learn anything about the Collectors is to kill everyone involved, right?
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Yep, so from Mass Effect Redemption, sometime after the destruction of the SSB Normandy, Aria is approached by Liara T'Soni, who obviously is, in the games, one of Commander Shepard's most trusted sort of squad mates. And Farron, whilst looking for Commander Shepard's body, Farron tells Liara to let him do the talking, which leads to Aria teasing her for being unable to speak. Aria says that she would divulge where the Blue Suns were taking the body if they tell her why the Shadow Broker is so interested. Liara then blurts out that the Shadow Broker is selling the body to the Collectors, catching Aria off guard, and refusing to show weakness, she tells Liara and Farron to leave, but not before disclosing the trade-off location. So obviously this leads to Shepard's body being recovered before Mass Effect 2 by Liara, which is a huge important plot point that happens sort of off screen.
Yep. So the next appearance is in Mass Effect Discovery, which is really a story to do with Andromeda. And so a lot of what happens in this, from our perspective, the perspective of Brock and Sindri, and I think many fans, this may or may not, or should or shouldn't be considered actual canon at this stage. But let's just go through it anyway, because I guess officially it is. So Aria biotically strangles Tyran Kandros, who's a character in Andromeda and related to Nyreen Kandros. So she strangles Tyran Kandros upon getting her hands on him, thinking he's the saboteur she has been chasing. But her girlfriend at the time, Nyreen, persuades her to let go, as she confirms Tyran is her cousin. Aria sarcastically quips that Nyreen's bleeding heart tendencies must be genetic, when Nyreen calls herself the bad apple of the family compared to Tyran. Aria then demands to know Tyran's business on Omega. He claims he's working for the Andromeda Initiative and looking for a Quarian scientist of theirs. However, Aria thinks he's a con job, but ultimately is dismissive of the Turian and warns him never to show his face again after doing what he came on Omega to do. She then berates Nyreen for wasting her time with strays. So it's a kind of a really crappy little bit that Aria appears in, not much, but yeah. Obviously more of this later on BioWare storytelling devices, which is to make the men look really shit and excuse my language, so to look really like powerless and toothless compared to females. But anyway, that's another story.
Yeah, and obviously they're also kind of just using her as a character to reference, just kind of for the sake of it, to give Andromeda more legs to stand on, despite the fact that I think Aria should have nothing to do with Andromeda at all and didn't need to be name dropped in the slightest. But anyways,
yeah, well, in the rest of the business, that's called a cheap pop.
Yeah,
that's what that is.
But anyways, so her first major appearance, but not obviously chronologically, but her first major appearance in the games is Mass Effect 2, when Shepard approaches her in Afterlife. Aria's guards accost Shepard with a stern warning not to step any closer, and then begin to scan him to determine whether Shepard is who he has said he is. Shepard then asks Aria for general information that she may have, but she only tells the commander not to waste her time and try some other news sources elsewhere. She makes it clear to the commander not to cause any trouble, as her Batarian bodyguard is willing to toss any offender out of the airlock. Shepard could then question her about Archangel and Mordin, which is basically how he gets information on recruiting the two of them. After recruiting Mordin, Shepard can then give Aria a datapad detailing
Archangel.
Oh, is it after recruiting Archangel?
The former, yeah, rather than the latter.
Yeah, the latter.
Yep.
So after recruiting Archangel, Shepard can then give Aria a datapad detailing a plan by the Blood Pack, Blue Suns, and Eclipse to overthrow her after defeating Archangel. So just some information, basically, calling in a favor, basically helping Aria a little bit.
Which she then obviously throws in the face of one of her bodyguards and says, like, how did this slip through their net, which I thought was quite an interesting little thing. Basically, sometime after this, Aria then, through one of her bodyguards, Grizz, who I believe is a Batarian, asked Shepard to protect Patriarch, a Krogan who was... no, Grizz is not... I think he was a Batarian. He may have actually not been a Batarian. I think he was the Turian. Anyway, he asked Shepard to protect the Patriarch, who's the Krogan and the former ruler of Omega, before Aria deposed him. Patriarch is supposedly being targeted by Blood Pack mercenaries, and the commander can persuade Grizz to reveal the reason for hiring them and not using Aria's own mercenaries, which is revealed that Aria's interest in protecting the Patriarch can be seen as a weakness by her rivals. So if Shepard pursues this assignment, the commander can either choose to kill the Blood Pack assassins or convince Patriarch to attack them and reclaim his former glory. The latter choice results in his death, though. After the mission, Aria allows Shepard to ask questions about her past, though she does still remain vague about some of the details.
Yeah, so during Samara's loyalty mission, Shepard asks Aria about Morinth, and she gives details of the Arda Yakshi's latest victim. If Samara asks Aria why she hasn't taken any action against Morinth, Aria simply states that Morinth has not attempted to seduce her, so she hasn't seen a need to, as we said a little bit earlier, I believe.
Yes.
Obviously, it doesn't really impact Aria herself, so why would she feel the need to sort of step in?
Yeah. So the next appearance will be from the novel Mass Effect Retribution, which is the third one in the accompaniment series, which comes between Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3. So Aria is still Pirate Queen of Omega, 3 years after Paul Grayson went on the run from Cerberus. Grayson is employed by Aria as a mercenary, taking care of operations such as stealing red sand from a rival gang, the Talons. Aria originally planned to have Grayson killed, but changes her mind when her daughter Lyselle pleads with her to spare his life, as he could be an asset to her. Aria then becomes angry when she found that her daughter was killed and Grayson was missing, which led her to believe that he is the potential cause of Lyselle's death. However, we know that Lyselle was actually killed by Kai Leng when he and 6 other Cerberus operatives came to capture Grayson. When Cerberus facilities are attacked by a Turian-led raid, Grayson escapes the Elusive Man's captivity. The Elusive Man, who is always a master manipulator, uses Aria's suspicions of Grayson's involvement in her daughter's death to persuade Aria to work with Cerberus.
So then her next appearance is in Mass Spec Deception, which is the 4th novel in the series, but it's actually not written by Drew Karpyshyn, and BioWare were forced by fans to admit that this book had discrepancies, so again it's kind of not official canon, but we'll go over it again anyways. So following the disastrous incident with Paul Grayson, Aria T'Loak leaves for Thessia to bury her daughter Lyselle. Upon returning to Omega from the Asari homeworld, she finds that one of her banks has been robbed by a joint coalition of the Grimskulls, a local merc group, and the Biotic Underground, a biotic supremacist organization. One of the Grimskulls' merc, Shella, has been captured in the heist. In a plea for her life, Shella claims to have knowledge of Lyselle's death. Prior to joining the Grimskulls, Shella freelanced, and one of the jobs she participated in was with a Cerberus operative named Manning, which was one of Kai Leng's aliases. Shella then relates the actual events of Lyselle's death, as depicted in Mass Spec Retribution, as we just talked about. But Aria does believe Shella's story enough to let her go instead of executing her on the spot.
Yep. So later on in the meeting with Carly Sanders and David Anderson, Aria learns that Paul Grayson had forwarded all of his files to Sanders' terminal at the Citadel before wiping his own terminal the night he was killed. I'm actually going to stop right here because even just reading this part, so this was written by a different author, and we'll do another video I think on this at some point. But pretty much everything that we've mentioned counts as some of the discrepancies that BioWare admitted to. Number 1, Aria going to Thessia would not happen. Number 2, basically, Grimskulls had been wiped out in the very first book by Saren completely. He literally killed all of them. So that they're gone. And basically, just the whole thing is just ridiculous. So the whole Carly Sanders, David Anderson thing, another discrepancy. Paul Grayson forwarding his files to a terminal. No, none of this. So I'm just going to stop there. There's stuff that she does in this book, and she's quite heavily featured because I think the new author thought it was a good character to use, but unfortunately, I think he did it badly. So let's just say this is just not canon at all. Sorry. I was just reading through that. I thought we'll just run through it anyway. But then reading through that, actually, a lot of the discrepancies from the book were in that.
Yeah, it's just not even worth explaining what the discrepancies are at this point. We might as well just move on to. Are we just going to move on to Mass Effect Invasion, or do we want to talk about Mass Effect 3?
Because Invasion comes before Mass Effect 3 as well. So actually, what we can say is that Deception didn't happen, and actually what was happening during that time was Invasion. Set up Mass Effect 3, but we don't need to go through it. What I'll say is we've got another video on Omega. If you want to know what happens with Aria in that video, go and check, but we'll summarize to say that Cerberus did a coup attempt and sort of took Omega Station from Aria's control, put it in lockdown, and basically in Omega DLC in Mass Effect 3, she recruits Shepard to basically come back and retake this Omega from Cerberus, which is a really good DLC. You can talk about her meeting in Mass Effect 3 before the DLC though, I think, because that summary is really what it is, but again, more on that in our Omega video. But you can meet Aria on the Citadel actually, in Mass Effect 3. So do you want to summarize some of that for the viewers?
Yeah. So after she lost Omega to Cerberus, she fled to the Citadel, which is flooding with refugees from the Reaper assault. So she sort of uses that as a cover to get into the Citadel, and she actually manages to survive on the Citadel for 3 weeks before CSEC finally realized that she hasn't submitted to the immigration processing. And she did indeed know methods to board the Citadel undetected. So obviously, again, this kind of shows that Aria is no joke, even off of Omega. However, Aria simply calls the Asari counselor to have her cleared with an immigration officer, which then eventually shows up at her lair demanding her compliance. She then spends the rest of her time lounging in Purgatory Bar, which is eventually where Shepard finds her. And when asked about her current situation, she actually snaps at Shepard for finding it funny, and she angrily states that her confinement to the Citadel, with a poor excuse for a nightclub, and the constant watch of C-Sec, and the lack of Novarian rum, and all sorts of other things, is making life hell for her. And she swears vengeance against Cerberus for taking Omega from her. So at this point, she's very angry.
Yeah, she is. I think we know that Novarian rum, and Novaria being Nova Siberia, as again discussed in another video, I think we know that's probably more likely to be vodka than actual rum, being their version of like Russia. But anyway, it is quite funny. Some of these meetings are quite amusing actually, especially the scene where the CSEC officer tries to remind her for not going through the correct process. And she immediately gets the Asari counselor up. It's kind of cool. And yes, it does make sense. To me, when I first played through it, I was like, that doesn't really make much sense. But actually it does. When you think about someone that's the de facto leader of the Terminus systems, that the council are always basically treading on eggshells around the Terminus systems because they don't want to get into war, they probably would do that for her. So to move on, there's a few sort of side missions that to gain basically being able to unite the Blue Suns, Eclipse, and Blood Pact mercs in exchange for their assistance in retaking Earth. So you kind of have to run around and do some things for her. Things like dealing with General Oraka, the Turian, who you actually meet in the very first one, in the very first Mass Effect game in Hora's Den. If you remember, one of those early missions where he was spreading lies about the consort, the Asari consort. So that's a really cool thing that can come back. In fact, no, that's not him, is it? I don't think that... Is that him? I think it's him. I might be wrong. Maybe I'm conflating him with another Turian that you meet again in this third game, but I think it's him.
I think the picture... It says it's in Mass Effect 1. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's
Septimus Oraka?
That's the same dude.
He's the one spreading... Isn't he? He's the one spreading lies. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay. Well, there you go. So that's one that he doesn't appear in Mass Effect 2 at all, and this is one of the things that I love about this series as well, is characters like that small little side things, but come back to bite you or reward you depending on how you went about things in the first game. But anyway, so there's a few little missions like trying to get a Jonas Sideris, who's a crazy merc, to be released from prison or whatever, and you could have some choice in how you go about it, but basically you're doing errands for her, and it's kind of interesting. So then Omega DLC happens. You go and you eventually, long story short, you take back Omega, and then there's another little reference in the Citadel DLC. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I guess is this in this section here?
Citadel DLC is just before it's the next section after Omega DLC.
All of Omega, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so if you scroll down,
So Aria T'Loak is clearly an avid gamer and fierce competitor, as shown by her holding the high scores in the Armax Arsenal Arena and shattered Ezo at the Castle Arcade on the Silver Sun Strip prior to Commander Shepard's visit. Aria is also mentioned in the pre-recorded story by Mordin Solus, who includes it on a datapad, and he may leave it for Shepard. Recounting the tale in the style of a film noir movie, Mordin mentions having previously been employed by Aria to deal with a Krogan rival, a job which eventually ended with an explosive sexual encounter before narrowly escaping an attempt by Aria to kill him.
Yeah, okay.
Definitely some interesting plot threads with Aria here as well.
I mean, to me, it doesn't quite make sense, because if you remember the Aria quote on Mordin Solus right in the start of Mass Effect 2?
I don't remember it word for word, but...
So she doesn't talk about having known him that well, but having a knowledge of him when Shepard asks and she's the one that says the great like I respect a man like that is just as likely to kill you as he is to heal you, or something like that, which was really cool. So but it's nonetheless like the fact that it was an explosive sexual encounter, I mean, that's pretty incredible. So that's pretty much all of the references in Mass Effect lore and story to Aria. I guess we want to talk about a little bit of speculations and theories. And I'll just start with the easy one, which is that Carrie-Anne Moss, the kind of legendary actress now at this point, particularly famous for the role of Trinity in The Matrix, which is another classic cyberpunk a work of art. She's the voice of Aria, and as a great, strong voice actress, she really helps Aria come alive, I think, as a character, and give her a lot of weight, because she has that delivery and that voice. I think it's a great performance, to be honest. And I also think, as I said, it's one of the strongest voice performances of any of the characters in the Mass Effect trilogy too. And I think personally, because of this, that the character of Aria then was taken very seriously and was made more believable. And I would probably contrast this personally to the character in Andromeda, for example, Sloan Kelly. I think we mentioned this before in a Omega video, but Sloan Kelly is sort of like the Andromeda version of Aria in some ways. Who's voiced by another quite famous actress at this point called Indira Varma, who Game of Thrones fans will know as Ilaria Sand, and other BioWare game fans will know her as Vivienne in Dragon Age Inquisition, who I think also is a bit of a highly controversial, almost like SJW insert style character, and I think a lot of the original Dragon Age fans didn't like this character that much, and again, there might be quite a few people that did, and that's fine. In my personal opinion, I don't think she's the best actress, personally. Although I think she's very, very recognizable. I've seen her in quite a few different things over the years, and I don't think she gives very memorable appearances. And I definitely thought her voice work for Sloan Kelly was subpar. And as a result, like, it just makes the character not feel good. And it might be a bit down to bad script writing, maybe down to just generally being an obvious kind of insert character, which I thought it really was. But I think they had the kind of the same goal as with Aria, but with Aria, the scripting and the character build up, the performance, like everything, the setting, made it a true icon. Whereas Sloan, for example, was more of a forgettable character, if you ask me. I mean, what do you think to that?
Yeah, I agree. I think they did something right with Aria, and I don't think they needed to try to sort of insert a second, like, almost discount Aria character into Andromeda. I think they should have really just gone the route of creating a whole new character archetype. I think obviously, as we can tell, not only did the game itself kind of fall flat, but yeah, the character of Sloan fell flat pretty hard, whereas I think Aria stands as definitely one of the most iconic Mass Effect characters in the entire series.
Yep. And look, and I think the fact that it wasn't a mistake that they went for Carrie-Anne Moss. As I said, another iconic character from another iconic cyberpunk story, and Omega in particular being one of the most typical cyberpunk settings, in the whole Mass Effect series. But also, there's a lot of, I guess, similarities with some of her other characters. So Carrie-Anne Moss also, after this, played I know it's not before, but after this played I think a lawyer in like Daredevil and like the Netflix Marvel series, and she was very good in that. With that, like, I guess that's the right way of putting it. Like, she kind of had that power, that confidence and that aura still. And so, it's almost a match made in heaven. And I remember my first playthrough of any Mass Effect game was Mass Effect 2, and obviously you go to Omega very early. And I remember meeting Aria for the first time when I played the game, and it was like the first character that you meet where you're like, okay, apart from the Elusive Man, obviously, who's another story, but another great actor. But when you meet like Aria, you're like, wow, like, this is a real powerful performance, I have to say.
Yeah, again, look, as you say, it really is kind of a match made in heaven in terms of like the character itself, but also, yeah, with the voice acting, it's just, it's absolutely a very, very powerful character in all of Mass Effect, and I'm a huge fan. So if you haven't played through the games and you're still here and you haven't visited Omega yet, 100%, even if it's just to meet Aria, you have to. It's required.
You could even say it was a match made in Afterlife.
Definitely could. But with that, I think we don't have too much else to say on Aria. So again, as we've said through the video, check out our video on Omega itself, as there's a bit more information on her there. regarding the specifics of sort of losing control of Omega and then retaking it. So yeah, definitely check that one out. But yeah, with that, thank you for watching.
Don't fuck with Aria.